The art of the create a class. What makes a good create a class system? Is it purely options, the lack thereof, or somewhere in between? I'm Loadabuggy, and today we're going to take a shallow dive into the history of create a class and what makes a good create a class system in FPS games, and more particularly, Call of Duty. If you enjoy these types of videos, I would greatly appreciate a like. These videos take a fair bit of time to create, but without further ado, let's dive into the complete history of Call of Duty's create a class. In order to fully understand how we arrived at the create a class system in the first place, I want to take a quick moment and reflect on some of the games that laid the groundwork for such a system to exist. Games like Team Fortress and Battlefield 1942 both had a class system. Granted, these games' classes were more like roles, but they were the early days of FPS classes nonetheless. Most of us likely already know the classes available in Team Fortress, being the Scout, Sniper, Soldier, Demo Man, Medic, Heavy Weapons Guy, Pyro, Spy, and Engineer. All of these classes had a unique role to play that complemented the other playable classes in the game. The same logic applies to the early Battlefield games as well, and we've seen those roles carry on through future Battlefield games over the years. Those classes being the Scout, Assault, Medic, and Engineer. The names have changed a bit throughout some of the Battlefield games, but the role of each class has mostly stayed the same. These class systems would give the player choice that works with their preferred playstyle. Call of Duty and Medal of Honor would both carry this tradition through their games, although a bit more loosely. Rather than having a predetermined role, these games' class systems were more just like preset loadouts of the various guns included in the game. Snipers, assault rifles, SMGs, etc. That now brings us to what I believe to be the first true implementation of what we now know as the Create a Class system, 2007, the year of Call of Duty 4. Call of Duty 4 was already set to be a smash hit due to its modern setting, being a more desirable setting for an FPS game than the rather oversaturated World War II setting that many players were rather fed up seeing at this time in gaming history. I won't dive too deep into Call of Duty 4 itself, as I've already done a video on that, which you can watch by clicking the link here. But what Call of Duty 4 managed to accomplish with the Create a Class system was giving the player the choice to assume the role of the traditional FPS game that we've all come to know, but then elevated it to something never before seen. You could not only select your class, but adjust nearly every aspect of your class to your liking. From primary and secondary weapons, perks, and special grenades, COD4 revolutionized the FPS class system and changed the multiplayer FPS space as a whole. The Create a Class would carry on as a staple to every Call of Duty that would follow, and its influence would bleed out into other FPS game series, including the aforementioned game series Battlefield and even Halo 4. Battlefield set the standard for the class system and then later adapted the customizability that COD4 had standardized in itself. In Battlefield Bad Company and future Battlefield games, you could now select not only your class, but you could also select your preferred primary weapon, secondary weapon, equipment, etc. Call of Duty 4 made waves in the FPS genre, directly impacting its competitors and changing the trajectory of the series as a whole. And some might say this all started because of the Create a Class. So how has Create a Class evolved? Have these evolutions changed the game for the better? And which incarnation of the Create a Class system was the best? I feel like the people watching this video already know all about Create a Class and how it has evolved throughout the years, but for the sake of being thorough, let's discuss anyway. Create a Class really didn't change much in the Call of Duty series from Call of Duty 4 to World at War. The only changes that World at War had that weren't in Call of Duty 4 were the addition of new types of lethal grenade options and a perk slot specifically for the usage of artillery in World at War. Other than that, World at War was essentially COD4 but in a World War II setting. MW2, on the other hand, is where massive changes began to occur. MW2 increased the amount of options in basically every single area. Perks now had layers with the inclusion of pro perks, death streaks, more weapons, more grenades, more everything. All guns, primary and secondary, now had attachment options beyond a suppressor and evolution of those attachments. For example, after you met the kill threshold for using a red dot on a primary weapon, you would unlock a holographic sight. After meeting the threshold for using a suppressor, you would unlock the heartbeat sensor, etc. This added layer of class evolution gave the Create a Class system even more depth and flexibility for the player. MW2 followed the lead of COD4 and continued to push the series forward even more. Then came Black Ops. This would be another big shakeup for the Create a Class system. Not only did you have the usual perks, guns and grenades, you now had a variety of equipment, a slew of new camos, face paint, gun emblems, and gun clan tags to choose from. Another massive addition to the create a class system, and yet another step forward to give the player even more choice. The question is, how would this continual increase of choice impact create a class as a whole? Well, we aren't quite there yet, but we'll see where these things went a little wrong soon enough. MW3 wouldn't change too much in terms of options, and in fact, they actually took a step backward in terms of options in a few areas, and took a step forward in a few other areas. Gun emblems, gun clan tags, and face paint were all gone, but one massive change that many players loved was the modification IW made to the killstreak system. No longer did we have universal kill streaks that applied to all classes. You now had strike packages, assault, support, and specialist, that you would select on a per-class basis, and added weapon proficiencies that fine-tune how well your weapon performed. Kick, focus, two attachments, etc. Which, once again, added another layer of choice for the player. Now we reach what most of us consider to be the gold standard for create a class, Black Ops 2's Pick 10 system. This was the perfect blend of choice and balance. You had your usual weapons and perk options, but now your options were significantly increased with the caveat that you only had 10 options. But that didn't just restrict you, that meant you had 10 choices and you could orient them in any way that you wanted to. Although you could have 5 to 6 perks selected at a time, you had to sacrifice your secondary weapon or grenades or primary attachments. This system was the perfect blend of player choice and balance for the game, and it would return in future Call of Duty games such as Black Ops 3, Infinite Warfare, and Black Ops 4. Call of Duty Ghosts comes next, and this honestly just felt like more of the same of what MW3 did, but it also didn't take too many steps backward. COD Ghosts was a rather safe addition to the Call of Duty franchise, however it did do some unique things as well. The main difference between Ghost and previous entries was the perk selection system. There were a slew of new perks to choose from that all aligned with a particular category, and each perk had a point value assigned to them, and you could only choose up to 10 points of perks. That meant that you could load up on 2-point value perks, or you could hone in on the more powerful perks with a higher point value. This was a unique blend of both the traditional create a class system and the Pick 10 system. Advanced Warfare was a game that took a lot of risks. Many of these risks were positive, but just as many hurt the series going forward. Regarding the create a class, Advanced Warfare did a lot of cool things. My favorite was the score streak modifications. You could tweak the streaks to be more powerful with abilities like adding rockets to your warbird, or making your UAV last longer, or even give you wall hacks. Additionally, this being the first boots-off-the-ground Call of Duty, the Exo Launcher replaced the usual lethal and tactical grenades, and you could select one or the other as your launcher grenade and pair it with a Exo ability such as Hover. Additionally, AW added character customizations, allowing you to unlock eyewear, helmets, knee pads, exosuits, gloves, and more. The customization ran deep with AW, but the main problem that Advanced Warfare had was the supply drops. Being able to get variations of weapons in the supply drops did give the player even more choice with the existing weapons, but it also was a nightmare to balance, and there were clear standouts such as the Bal Obsidian Steed and the ASM-1 Speakeasy. Variations like this were nice initially, but with balance being a problem, many people just used the same old guns and the options seemed obsolete. We could continue to see more of the same in terms of create a class throughout the next 4 to 5 years. Black Ops 3 would continue to use the Pick 10 system, including the wild cards and some additional customization options with the Specialist. It was a more simplified customization system, similar to AW, but with less cosmetic options for your Specialist. World War II wouldn't change much, and also went back to a more simplistic create a class system like MW2, but with some cool additions like the divisions and basic training. Divisions were essentially a nod to classes reminiscent of Battlefield, with added bonuses that benefited a certain style of play. Basic trainings were basically a class perk with other various benefits. Call of Duty was nothing short of creative throughout its golden years, but there was only so much room for innovation. Or so it seemed. Modern Warfare 2019 was a massive year of change for the Call of Duty series, and it had a return to a more simplistic create a class system. Choose your weapons, equipment, and perks. That's it. That being said, with additions like the Gunsmith section, your seemingly limited amount of choices explode in the form of attachments. Layers and layers of attachments to choose from in order to build your loadout that perfectly suits every map, every situation, and every playstyle. It was another innovation in the create a class system that provided great balance and choice to the player. The Gunsmith system gave the player a vast array of options, but only in the areas where it truly mattered, the attachments. You'd think that giving the player even more options regarding their attachments would be a slam dunk for players. MW2 2022 comes out and now includes not only the gunsmith system, but attachment tuning. This was a rather intriguing idea that fell extremely flat with the audience of MW2. Not only was the game itself poorly received by consumers, but the attachment tuning put many players off as it was an overcomplicated system for such a casual and mainstream audience. This is not to say the modern Call of Duty audience isn't smart enough to take advantage of said system, but in reality, most Call of Duty players enjoy the game because it's easy to pick up for an hour or two, play some matches with buddies, and log out. It's an easy to learn but difficult to master experience that is extremely casual friendly. Adding an overly complex attachment tuning system was not attractive to most players. They simply didn't have the time. They wanted to select their attachments, understand the benefit or trade-offs of said attachments, and get in the match. Although the tuning system wasn't horribly executed, the learning curve of such a system led most players to just look up guides on what the meta is and rolled with those setups, essentially making tuning completely irrelevant. Too many layers was not the formula. This opinion was clearly understood and received by the devs themselves because in the very next entry, the tuning system was removed in favor of the more simplified gunsmith system, and it hasn't returned yet. Now we reach modern day with Black Ops 6. They have continued to retain the traditional gunsmith system and blended it with the Black Ops staple wildcards. Although it's not the pick 10 system, it's a reasonable balance of flexibility and simplicity that players have grown to appreciate. At least it seems that way from my point of view. Call of Duty was traditionally a series that prided itself on being a franchise that was always trying to evolve and push itself forward. But forward doesn't always mean more, and more doesn't always mean better. What was your favorite rendition of the Create a Class throughout Call of Duty's history, and what would you do to improve its modern form? I'd love to hear from you in the comments section below. Bye now.
You're all that remains. Finish the mission. We got the bomb. Counter spy plane standing by.